Here is something you will never hear come out of my mouth. Hey, you're no Faulkner. You're no Toni Morrison. You're no J.K. Rowling. You're no Stephen King. That's right. You aren't, and I'm not. I'm not Stephen King. Stephen King's not me. By which I mean, only I can write the books I write. Only I can write the stories I write, and only he can write the stories he writes. I don't want to write his books. He doesn't want to write mine. Seems obvious enough. But I wanted to mention that because today I want to talk about humility, one of the most important aspects of the creative process. By humility, I don't mean saying, well, this one's better than me, and that one's better than me, and I'm not as good at. That's not humility. That's not the humility I'm talking about. Ultimately, there's no comparing. You may like one better than the other, but at the end of the day, the creative process, only you can write your stories and only I can write mine. No, this is what I mean by humility. I was interviewing James Lee Burke, and he and I got to talking about the muse, or what is generally called the muse. And he had said to me, look, because I knew he didn't outline. He didn't. He said, look, man, if you think you do this alone, he was talking about creative writing. If you think you do this alone, just give up now, because you can't. And as soon as you take credit for what you've written, he said to me, as soon as you take credit, forget it. It's over. You'll never hear from your muse ever again. Don't take credit. Okay, fine. I understood what he was talking about. I don't totally agree with him in terms of the taking credit. I will say this. If you do start taking credit for the work, and I'll explain what I mean by that in just a moment, the door does close to where the ideas come from. In other words, your writing process, as I've mentioned in previous, or your job as a writer, as I've mentioned in previous episodes, is to listen, is to ask questions and listen. What you're listening to, we call the muse generally, but you can call it whatever you like. That answer comes to you. And part of the job of the writer is to acknowledge, yes, that came to me. I didn't do it. I did ask the question, but the answer came to me. And if you start taking credit for both the question and the answer, in my experience, the answer doesn't come. It stops coming. But unlike what James Lee Burke said, I don't think the muse is vindictive, or I don't think the muse will stop answering. She'll just wait. She'll just wait. And that's what I mean by humility. Not taking full credit. Understanding your role is to ask a question, be interested in it, and then wait for the answer to come and appreciate that the answer came. That's humility. That is saying, I am doing this with someone else. I'm also reminded of this time I listened to a writer. She was a self-help writer, and she was doing a kind of podcast where she was answering people's questions. People had problems and they would write to her. She was a kind of a spiritual writer, and someone had called in and they asked her, or they wanted to ask a question, but they first mentioned a book that she had written 2 books ago. And they said, oh, I love such and such a book. And then this woman, this author said, yeah, that was a great one. And I thought, I think she's got it right. Because when you are writing something, you should love it. You should appreciate it, because to some degree, the humility that I was talking about allows you to appreciate the ideas that come to you as if they're not fully yours, but as if you've just discovered them and are so excited by them, and you have. You see, that's the thing about being a writer. You ask a question, the answer comes, and then you discover it, but only you can then translate it so that other people can appreciate it too. So that's your job. You shepherd it forward. But the humility comes from saying, look, I didn't fully create this, but I did recognize it. I did ask the question, and then I did spend the time translating it so that someone else could appreciate it too. And that allows you, as someone who wrote it, who was involved in the bringing it forward, to also love it and appreciate it almost as if you didn't write it. Because sometimes, don't you finish a really great sentence, finish a really great story, and then a month or a year later, you look at it and you don't even remember writing it. It's like you didn't even do it. And on some level, you, the little you, didn't. But the bigger you, the artist you, the one in connection with the muse, that one did. And that's how you stay humble. Thanks for watching. As always, hit subscribe if you don't want to miss a dose of inspiration. And if you like it, say so. Helps other people find it. Yes, it does. And it's good to have your voice heard. So Till next week, this is Bill Kenower. Stay fearless.